Good afternoon, everybody. If I could ask you all to rise, please. And if I could ask Michael Troughton to start our meeting off by leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
There you go. Perfect. Yeah. When was the last time you were called?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Michael. And BJ, if you would mind leading us in the invocation, please.
Good afternoon and happy February. Earlier this week happened to be Chinese New Year. And if you're anything like me, January flew by and you kind of wish you could restart it. So we'll use Chinese New Year as the opportunity for that. So I'll offer this invocation. Each year offers a new slate, and we must write upon it. Let us write truth, fairness. Let us write friendship, solidarity. Let us write peace, joy. Let us write thankfulness for what we accomplished together. Let us write new plans and new dreams. Let us write new goals and new hopes. And let us write new joys. May the year bring our club new projects, new members, new success, new friends, and a fervor for Rotary that doesn't end. Thank you.
You know that, gentleman?
Very nice, BJ. Thank you so much. All right, everyone, go ahead and take a seat. We'll get things started off by asking, see if there's any visiting Rotarians today. Visiting Rotarians? Yeah, please. Hold on for a mic.
My friend.
So I'd like to introduce Bruce Laraway, who is a visiting Rotarian from the Austintown Rotary Club in District 6650 in Ohio, and his lovely wife, Bev, and wanted to give them a moment to also share some things that their club is doing out and about. So thank you for being with us today.
Well, my wife Beverly, I asked her to join me because she enjoys Rotary as much as everyone here. It's a pleasure meeting most of you. Not all of you, but past president, and we accomplished a couple of great things. We have a project called Veterans Outreach, and that's for a lot of the homeless veterans that unfortunately commit suicide, 22 a year. And we got it passed by the Federation, and we give them cash for bus rides, taxis, anything to get them to the VA, and also food and clothing. That's one of my projects that I got going. The second one that we're really proud of back home is our flag. Now, you guys have a desert, so it's probably pretty hard to put a flag in your yard unless it's mounted to a building. But our flag project, we started 7 years ago, and we're now close to 800 flags. Canfield's Club, who's one of our neighbors, has over 1,700, and Boardman, who's another neighbor, has over 1,500. So in the three communities, there's over 3,000 American flags flying.
Wow.
Up and down roads and businesses. And that pretty much, those are our two big ones. We also do Operation Warm. Now we're in Arizona, so you guys have a problem with freezing pipes at 30 degrees. We don't have that problem back home. So we do Operation Warm, which we donate, and we go around and collect money for homeless kids and children and give them socks, gloves, coats, and we pass it out through the Salvation Army. And that's one of our sponsors. So that's pretty much an overview, and I'm very glad to be here. I'm glad my wife and I'll be here probably the next couple meetings. We're going to be going back home in March. So look forward to the next ones.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Are most Rotary meetings?
I have a guest. Her name is Susan Ponton. She's from Connecticut, which is having an ice storm as we speak. And she is a Paul Harris Fellow, but not a Rotarian, but a Paul Harris Fellow for all of her charitable work.
Welcome.
And we have a guest today. Most of you already know our daughter Brendan, nurse practitioner with CVS Minute Clinic, and a mom and a wife. So we're so glad she's here today.
Well, thank you all for joining us, Beverly and Bruce. Thank you for that little, yeah, that's quite a lot you do there. So I'm sure your community's good, and our community's better for having you now. So you can just move, just don't beat around the bush. Just move back here. And well, you can add Catalina Rotary to the list. Hopefully we'll see more of you. Yeah. And Susan, it's great to see you. Thank you for joining us. And of course, Brendan, thank you for joining us.
Jimmy, can I interrupt just
yes,
briefly?
please.
Point out that on the lower left of our screen there, you'll see Gordon Brown, a longtime Catalina Rotarian.
I don't see where he's at.
Thank you for joining us. And for all of you on Zoom, it's good to see you as well. Let me see here. I'm going to get started with a couple of announcements. And first and foremost, our esteemed treasurer pointed this out to me earlier today, or earlier just a little bit ago. But tomorrow is February 5th of February. And so it's not part of the Sergeant at Arms duties. I think it would be a little bit more celebratory, but today is, or tomorrow will be, is the anniversary of Catalina Rotary. So it's a big day for us. And we were founded on February 5th, 1948.
Whoops.
So who has enough fingers and toes to do the math there? 74, sorry. That's a scribe-in issue. So yeah, I think that's a wonderful thing to celebrate. So thank you for bringing that to our attention, Andy. That's really cool. Going along with our announcements, Irv, I'm going to turn things over to you for a little bit. As many of you know, we have a pretty big event coming up here in the next couple of weeks. So Irv, if you wouldn't mind giving us an update.
Oh, beer.
Yeah, the rodeo.
You ever done that?
No, sir.
It's actually kind of
I
fun.
want to just, well, let me start with Bobby D and I went down on last Sunday and met with the people at the rodeo. And there'll be some significant changes in the beer sales, which is going to make it a lot easier for us. So I want to point that out just in case there were some people that were reluctant to sign up because they weren't thrilled about moving the crates around all the time. So basically, normally there's been 2 deep, and we've had to rotate the beer from the bottom to the top. And it wasn't a problem for me when I was 50, but now that I'm 70, I'm thinking we don't have an orthopedic surgeon in the club, so I don't want to do that anymore. So there will be, all the beer will be on one level. It will be about this high, so we won't be bending over a lot, but it will be in ice, and which will turn into ice water. So what we're going to do is we'll have a minimum of 2 at each location. And what we're going to need to do is serve beer from one. As that one is getting close to empty, the rodeo, the course people are going to be coming around regularly. We're not going to have to call unless it's an emergency, but we're out of beer. They'll come, they will fill the one that's almost empty. They will put more ice on it, and we'll sell out of the other one. And then we'll rotate back and forth, which is going to save a lot of effort and a lot of backs. The one thing that we will have to be careful about is frostbite. So we'll have some extra gloves. Anybody who wants to bring their own gloves, especially the ones that I remember my mother using that came to here when she washed the dishes, that might be a good idea. So, and the other important thing about this is the booths previously where we had 5 people, booth number 1 and booth number 5, 4 is more than sufficient, and we can even get by with 3 because of the more assistance that we're going to get from the course people. That being said, we still need help. There are some days where we can use 2 or 3 more people. There are no days that we are totally full and don't need additional help except for, you want to guess? Your days, because Joanne is going to come with somebody, and Joanne and somebody will take care of those 2 days. Bob and who? Oh, good. And the other day?
I've got two, in fact, one of our neighbors, another good friend of Lou, neighbors Kathy Uhrlaub are coming, and they're coming at least one day, both of them are the other day.
Okay. I wasn't worried about you. So if everybody who can, and there are a number of people who've signed up for multiple days, and I really appreciate it. And we've had a few people that have signed up as a extra person. That will be very helpful if I can fill that for every day, because at the last minute, you never know where you're going to have a shortage and where you might need somebody. So we're getting close, but I really would appreciate everybody looking at the sign up. Anybody who doesn't know how to use it, the expert, Arturo, is right there, and he will make sure you know how to use it. No matter. See, Arturo has it covered. So again, I would appreciate it. Anything that, if you could do another day, people that sign up as a backup, if you call me, if you can be a backup, but let's say you can't show up until noon, we'll make that work, because we really don't need a full crew at 10 o'clock, but we do need the full crew by noon. And that backup, if it's somebody who says, hey, I can come down for, 3 hours or 4 hours, that's great, because then I could use the backup to spell people for lunches or whatever. So yes. Yes. And Tony is the one that Bob and I met with, and he understands that we need to make this work. So they plan on having 2 kids. They can't do anything with beer, but there'll be like high school kids coming around regularly with ice. And then his crew will come around with beer, restock it for us. So it should work fairly.
Date. It's coming soon, so please check your calendars and see if you're available for all those slots. Arturo, are there any specific days that need attention? The last day, 27th. Okay. So please look at your calendars and your neighbors. If you like them, invite them. If you don't like him, then invite them too. And yeah, just make it more the merrier. All right. I was hoping that Andrew was going to be here, but is there anyone that attended the Habitat for Humanity from a couple of weeks ago? Tony? Yeah. So I don't know if one of you, Liz, would you mind giving us a little rundown of how things went? Put you on the spot.
Tony complained I didn't have a hammer. It was great. I did a lot of painting. We did painting, and the rest of them, like Tony and everyone else, was pounding nails, I believe. As I said, Tony complained I wasn't. But it was a complaint. I'll take it.
Comes with it, Tony.
I will tell you though, they had 11. They're building 11 homes simultaneously up there, and they're in different phases, obviously. And there was a couple people there who are going to have those homes working. Obviously, they have to do 250 hours towards the project. I was able to speak a little Korean, which was lovely. My crew, she was Korean. It was fun.
K-pop fan, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. She knew BTS.
Oh, okay.
Unlike my
imagine,
club.
Yeah.
But overall, you do feel rewarded going. You're supposed to be helping, but they actually ended up helping me.
Right.
I learned a lot about real estate. My crew was all real estate. Oh, they have their own language. And I learned parts of town I don't want to live in.
Yeah.
So it was a great overall experience, and I would do it again in a heartbeat.
Oh, great. Well, if all those that did attend, if we can have you stand up so we can recognize you, and thank you for the level of service there. I know Tony had mentioned, so all those that were there, thank you. Great. All right, today is the first of the month, and I see Frank has a couple of extra bags. Frank, are you our point person for the cans today? All right, great. So for those that you might not know, we are collecting cans to raise funds for Rotaract Club, right? And so if you have your cans, and I do have some in my car, BJ, were you able to get a few thousand pounds together? Yeah. So, okay. Frank is. So Frank, should we just meet you outside after the meeting? Okay, great. So if you have your cans, see Frank after the meeting. And I think that's all I have. Are there any other announcements? Yeah, Bobby D.
Wait, Bobby D.
You might have gotten an email from Paul Bennett about a service opportunity this coming Tuesday in conjunction with the Oro Valley the Dove Mountain Rotary Club, and that is to work with the church in Oro Valley packing food that's sent out internationally. So if you, from 6 to 8 p.m. on Tuesday, if you would like to do something, just discreet, a couple hours that with another club, let me know and I'll send you the information. We should give immediate past district governor, I'm blanking on her name, Diane, a heads up that we're coming so that there'll be a head count. So Tuesday night service opportunity.
Perfect.
Dove Mountain.
And so with that said, just to jump on that really quick, Pat. So we're going to be moving just to accommodate those that want to take advantage of that service project. We're going to have the board meeting as opposed to that Tuesday night. We're going to move it up just one night. So our board meeting will be at 5:30 instead of the regular Tuesday meeting. So, yep, go ahead.
Those of you who were at the
Those of you who were at the mariachi event in December that we had, you might remember my wonderful son-in-law, David, who gave a little talk. As you may know, Pueblo High School has one of the highest rates of COVID in the city. And it was just a matter of time before David got COVID and my daughter. She only had a mild case. By Thursday of that week, he got the monoclonal antibodies. Then he got pneumonia. And then he couldn't breathe, so she took him to the emergency room where his oxygen level was so low that they sent him to Northwest Medical in the COVID ward. He was there and they gave him all kinds of oxygen masks and everything. He was there for about a day or a day and a half, and they moved him down to ICU, which we were happy about because you get a lot more attention and you have much better staff there. Well, he seemed like he was getting a little bit better, but 2 days ago, they intubated him and put him on a ventilator. So they say he may be on the ventilator for about 2 to 3 weeks. He has the underlying leukemia that he's been living with for 10 years. So that's why he got it. My daughter got bad and my daughter didn't. So all I'm saying is, please, everybody, if any prayer chain you have, put him on. His name is David Montano. Thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing. We'll definitely keep him and your family in our prayers.
Jimmy,
Yes.
Consistent with the board meeting moving up, if board members could get any inputs to me for the board packet by end of tomorrow, then I'll get the packets out on Sunday.
Thank you for that. All right. Any other announcements? Anyone on Zoom? Any announcements? All right. So that being said, we will continue with our meeting, and we have a special guest today. So as usual, our program committee puts together wonderful presenters and speakers. So today is no exception. And I'm going to have Al Chesser come on up and introduce our speaker today. Please welcome Al.
Thank you, Anita. I saw you clap. That was nice. That was nice. Well, whoa, February 5th, 90 or 48, our anniversary, our club anniversary. We used to have a little club handbook, and that was on the cover of every club handbook. But since we don't currently, none of us can remember the anniversary. So whoever looked that up, that was great. Wow, 74 years. And as you can see, we're still eating the same mystery chicken. Yeah. Well, at least they added mushrooms. You know? Yeah, we think, yeah, we think. Well, I'm particularly anxious to hear our speaker today. I had a little, I don't know, little shock when I came in and couldn't find her anywhere. And then it turns out she's up here on the screen. So maybe she knew who was going to introduce her and decided to stay home. But I don't know. But there she is. There she is, Jennifer. I was really hoping to meet our daughter, Brendan. Tay is here. And it was actually the link that put me on to Jennifer. And Brendan was here to meet you too. So you've double bummer, you know. But anyway, we're looking forward to the program, and it's so timely right now. We're all worried about the infectious diseases going around, the COVID and other things. And Jennifer, let me tell you about her a little bit. She received her BA from McDaniel College and a master's in biotechnology from Johns Hopkins University. She has been with the Nikolich Lab, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right, since 2005, and she works on a diverse array of projects to understand immune determinants. Hope I'm saying that right too. See, we would have discussed all this at the table. You know, anyway, of increased susceptibility to acute and chronic viral infections. I'm not sure what all that means, but she works a lot with helping people understand and doing research on the COVID virus and other similar things. And she's going to talk a little bit about immunity to COVID, including differences between infection-induced immunity and vaccines. And I think I've probably said more than enough to get her started here. So I would love it if you'd help me welcome to our virtual meeting, Jennifer Uhrlaub, and see what she has to say about the COVID situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. I really appreciate the introduction, and I am very sorry that I didn't come there in person today. I live with someone who is 81 and very medically vulnerable. So I've really got my out and about limited right now, but hopefully I'll be able to meet you at some other point. And I certainly do appreciate you inviting me to talk about this today. As you said, I have a lot of virology experience, more than like 20 years now, and 15 years of immunology experience trying to understand what it is that changes about our immune system as we get older. And why it is that older people are so much more susceptible to severe disease when they get an infection. And so when SARS-CoV-2 emerged in early 2020, I was either fortunately or unfortunately positioned to work on it, whether I wanted to or not. So I really miss working with viruses that most of you have never experienced, like West Nile, or even heard of, like chikungunya virus. But unfortunately, you've all heard of SARS-CoV-2. And I personally really enjoy these opportunities to talk to the community because I think it's completely unfair that we just expect people to understand immunology when they really never needed to think about it before. So I will try to go ahead and load my presentation here. Let's see. that. And, all right. So I'm going to talk to you guys today about immunity to COVID and the mRNA vaccine. And the way that I like to start this is by sort of teaching you a little bit about immunology, because it's really, as I said, unfair to think that people just naturally understand and all of these really complicated concepts that have been on the news for the last 2 years. And one of the things that I've found people are most surprised to understand is that your immune system is actually not designed to react to pathogens. It's designed to tolerate you. And I think this idea of tolerance is something we can all sort of appreciate, because we've had to tolerate a lot of things over the last 2 years. But basically what happens in your immune system is when it sees something that is not you, not part of your body, not something that should be in your body, then it actually does respond. So there's like this constant state of holding all of these different cells and everything else in check. And when it sees something that is foreign, like a pathogen or a virus, it actually releases that restraint, and then you are able to respond to it. So basically, like all of us, it tips over and it reacts when it detects something that is not self. It reacts when it sees something that is not supposed to be there. And I'm going to talk to you guys about 2 different phases of the immune response today, which this probably looks pretty scary, but I promise it's actually not. But there are 2 very distinct phases to your immune response. The first one we call innate immunity. This is the part of your immune system that responds no matter what it is. Doesn't matter if it's a virus, a bacteria, a vaccine. There is a way that your immune system responds whenever it sees any of those types of things. And this happens very early, hours to like very early days. And then the part of your immune system that you're always hearing about on the news has to do mostly with antibodies, but there's also cells that become present and accounted for and can go and kill infected cells. And so this is the part of your immune system that is trained and that you're trying to get to. But you have to do the whole shebang in order to actually get any of this. Now, this becomes kind of tricky because the part of your immune response that you experience, and we've all experienced this, is that you get this very early part, this innate part. So you get a vaccine, you feel like crap for 2 days. You get an infection and you feel it coming on. You get that headache and you get, just that I don't feel so great this morning. That is your innate immune response. And so it isn't actually whatever's infecting you. It's your own body's response to it that you're experiencing. And then eventually it slides and all the other things start to happen. So you get this really good immune memory that can help protect you later. So I wanted to give you guys sort of this basic overview. And the worst thing about a Zoom format is that I have no idea when I start to lose people. But in any case, I want you to understand that there are 2 phases, and that this early part you're going to feel, and this part is the part that's actually going to help you out the second time. So talk about the mRNA vaccines, because this was a new technology for most people. So, and I get asked a lot, like, how were they developed so quickly? So mRNA was discovered in 1961, and treatment technology using mRNA started in the 1990s. So this is not a new technology. In 2011, there were the first vaccine trials, and they were actually to treat melanoma and other cancers. So they were trying to use mRNA to be able to send your immune response against melanoma. And then in 2013, there was a trial of a mRNA rabies vaccine. In 2017, Moderna trialed a Zika virus vaccine in South America. And in 2019, Moderna trialed 2 mRNA flu vaccines. So these vaccines, this basic structure of the vaccine had been put into people well before COVID started in 2020. And these vaccines suffered from a lack of people getting infected with these viruses and being able to determine whether or not they were effective. They were very safe. The safety profile wasn't the problem. The problem was that by the time they got the Zika virus vaccine rolled out in South America, Zika virus kind of went away on its own. And so they couldn't tell whether or not it had worked. I like this one as an example because they gave it to healthy childbearing age men and women to help avoid a complication of Zika virus infection where a baby is born with like a severe brain problem, microcephalus, where their head is very small and they have a lifelong disability from it. So they wanted to give it to men and women who were trying to have a baby so that they could help prevent the mother from getting infected during pregnancy. But then Zika disappeared. And if a virus disappears, you can't actually study how effective the vaccine was. But the technology was around and had been put into people in many different trials prior to COVID. And they were developed so fast because when you need something, you can be very quick about it. And we threw a lot of money and people at this. You know, I was not involved at all in any of the vaccine work, but I can tell you that every single research project I was working on was put on full stop in the beginning of 2020, and I was pivoted completely to working on SARS-CoV-2. And many of us did that. So they pivoted a lot of people towards it. They threw a lot of money at it. And the framework was there from the earlier trials. They just had to apply it to the current problem. These vaccines have a benefit that they're actually very quick to physically manufacture. So the components of the mRNA vaccine are quite simple and clean. There's an mRNA component, which is the template that provides like the instructions to your cells to make the protein. And I'll talk more about that in a second. But it's a very like simple process, to make that. And as compared to like a traditional vaccine where you either have to like grow up a lot of virus and then inactivate it, it's like a physical process that is quite simple compared to the way traditional vaccines are manufactured. And what happens in your body when you get a COVID vaccine, one of the mRNA vaccines, is they've basically created this mRNA sequence which will give your cells instructions to make a protein. They needed to deliver it inside of a lipid coat. So it's coated in fat. And that was the way that they figured out they had to protect the mRNA in order for it to be intact when it entered into cells in order to make protein. So the lipid coat was actually the technology that made this a viable option for a vaccine. And then once it arrives in your cells, and these are the muscle cells in your arm, the vaccines don't ever leave your arm. These spike proteins from the virus, which are decidedly not you, which is why your immune system responds to it, are made, and then they drain to your lymph node, which is a structure underneath of your arm where an immune reaction can take place. And antibodies and T-cell responses happen at that point. So this is the part you feel. You feel your immune system sensing this foreign protein. And then once you get to this phase, you're back in your life and you're not really thinking about the vaccine anymore. But it's still doing its job weeks later. So just to cover a little bit of like what is actually in the vaccine, there's that mRNA. There is that fat particle, and there are salts and sucrose, and that's it. It's a really clean vaccine that doesn't require a lot of the complicated processes that some of the other available vaccines require. And then, of course, you know, there are these adverse events. I didn't have any with my first, I did with my second. You know, and you get like pain and tenderness, swelling. You might like notice that the underneath of your arm is like really sore. Those are the lymph nodes actually swelling during that reaction. And, you know, you feel fatigue and headache and muscle pain, joint pain, chills, nausea, vomiting, fever. Those things can happen, and they are all related to your own immune response to the vaccine, not to the vaccine itself. And depending on how well your immune system keeps control of itself, you will or won't feel that as much. 211 million people have been fully vaccinated to date in the United States. And by fully vaccinated, I mean 2 doses, although we're moving to 3. So as I mentioned before, this is the part of your immune system that you are experiencing. And within the first hours to days of getting a vaccine or becoming infected. And it's pretty much the same, regardless of whether it's a vaccine or an infection. Your body doesn't necessarily know that it's a vaccine and not an infection. So it kind of throws the whole arsenal at it straight out the gate. And that's important because it sets off this part, which we all want to end up with good antibodies and T cells that can, if it's seen again, if it infects you. But this part, you kind of have to handle, like you're just going to feel that way for a little while. So, all right, pivoting to SARS-CoV-2 and COVID. So SARS coronavirus 2 infection causes coronavirus-induced disease. And I think we probably all know now that it enters through the nose and the throat. And this is how you become infected with SARS-CoV-2 and a lot of other viruses, actually. But you get really severe disease when you get replication in your lungs. So we know, and you know, I know I lost my sense of smell and taste completely for about 2 weeks. When I got COVID in early 2020, it was bonkers. And so we know that you get like really high infection in your nose. But this isn't really the part that causes severe disease. The severe disease is when it hits your lungs and you start to get unchecked viral replication in your lungs. And, you know, the symptoms of COVID, fever, cough, shortness of breath, fatigue, muscle or body aches, headache, that loss of taste or smell that was very common with the very first virus that we experienced in 2020. Sore throat, congestion, runny nose, nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. These are all the symptoms of early COVID. And unfortunately, a lot of them are just the symptoms of most infections, which is, I think, part of the reason why this season has been so hard to navigate, because a lot of people are getting COVID, but with our increased circulation in the community, we've seen a lot of viral infections kind of come back. And it's hard to tell them all apart, or really to tell them apart at all early on without testing, because they all have the same symptoms. So if you're vaccinated, what happens is you actually end up with T cells and antibodies that can sort of limit how infected you actually become when you get this virus into you. And if the infectious dose is really low, meaning you only breathe in a very low number of viruses into your nose and into your lungs, then your immunity from vaccination or prior infection should be able to help you out, and you probably will not get very sick. These vaccines have now been demonstrated to be very effective at preventing disease requiring hospitalization, and that is the goal of any vaccine, is to prevent you from getting really, really sick. And there are ways that we can sort of tip the scales in favor of vaccine efficacy during our activities outdoors, having really good indoor ventilation and wearing high quality masks. The thing about masks is we all hate them. But fortunately, they've gotten more comfortable. And what they do is they limit how much virus you inhale and how much virus you exhale. So if you think about it in terms of like the dose making the poison, we all sort of know this to be true. If you need to take, 800 milligrams of ibuprofen, like that's okay, you can tolerate that. But if you need to take if you decide to take 3,000 milligrams of ibuprofen, well, then you might just send yourself into kidney failure. And it's sort of the same concept. If you inhale just a few virus particles, your vaccine immunity might handle it just fine, or you might get just a tiny bit of illness. But if you inhale a lot of virus, then it's going to very quickly overwhelm the immunity that you have on board and give you the potential to get more sick. So why are people feeling Delta and Omicron? Because, what happened early on was people got vaccinated and then we saw they really didn't get sick. And then these variants started coming out, and this is completely expected, but still really annoying. And so basically the reason why people are feeling Delta and Omicron is that these viruses have evolved to be so quick infecting us that you still feel that first part of your immune response, that innate response that I described. And so you feel that. But then when the virus tries to move to your lungs, fortunately, you have all that trained immunity on board that can knock it down. Now, unfortunately, if you are in a category where you are immunocompromised or have some other immune system problem, you're not going to have as good of an immune response, even if you're vaccinated. We have been able to show, and a lab that I do a lot of work with did a research study on cancer patients, and we're able to show that third dose, the immunity is there. You just need to keep dosing it in order to get it high enough to really give you good protection. So, but this is why you're feeling Delta and Omicron, and we weren't feeling that original virus. It's because the virus changed, not because there's anything wrong necessarily with the immunity from vaccination. So I want to talk a little bit about vaccinating kids. I have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, and they're both fully vaccinated. And the vaccine is currently available for all kids over age 5. The reason why it's important to vaccinate kids is because they do spread the virus as easily as adults do. And they're young and they're kids, and so we want them to not experience any more viral infections that have the potential to really do them harm than they absolutely need to. They are given a lower dose, which means that they have more tolerable side effects. So that early innate response is very good in children. And so they don't need as much in order to kickstart their immune response as an adult or an older adult would need. So they lowered the dose. And it's coming for kids ages 6 months to 4 years. They've lowered the dose to 3 milligrams. They've had 8,300 children in the trial. And right now, it was trialed originally as a 2-dose vaccine. And when they looked at the data, and they haven't shown the data yet, so this has all been discussed, but I haven't actually seen the data. The children who were in the 2 to 4 year old age group, they just didn't have as robust of a immune memory response as they had hoped, and they couldn't really determine whether or not it had been effective. This is very hard to do in children this age anyway, because first they have to be exposed to the virus. Then you have to see if any kids who were not given the vaccine actually got sick, and kids don't get sick as often from the virus as older people do. So it's like a coming together of all of these different things that make it difficult to tell. But the vaccine was very safe for all of these kids. It wasn't the safety that was a problem. They just couldn't quite tell if it was going to be effective in the 2 to 4 year olds. The under 2 to 6 months, they did see efficacy. So what they're doing is they are applying for emergency use authorization to start giving it to kids ages 6 months to 4 years. And in the meantime, they are giving the children in the trial a third dose to see whether or not what they really need it to be is a 3-dose vaccine instead of a 2-dose, which honestly is kind of what we're looking at for adults too. That third dose is really important for getting your immunity up even higher, and making sure that you have really robust long-term memory that's able to respond if you become infected. And I'm saying that based on some really good data out of Israel. So this is a country that has about the same vaccination rate as the United States, and they've been very good about following their communities, and they added a 4th dose, and what they've seen so far is that it didn't help. It's not actually improving immunity to the Omicron wave in their country right now. And so what that suggests is that 3 doses will get you to sort of the maximum level of immunity for a healthy person. And so they're actually not going to continue to recommend a 4th dose for people in their population as of like right now, which could totally change because the whole thing keeps changing. So why do kids get a lower dose? They get it based on age and not weight, as I sort of mentioned. And so I work in a group that really looks at the responses to vaccines in the elderly. And so what I know is that we give older people higher concentrations of vaccine in order to get a better response. So the shingles vaccine, the original shingles vaccine was 4 times the chickenpox vaccine that we gave to kids. We do the same thing with flu. We give a higher dose of vaccine to people over age 65 than we do people under age 65. Well, you go to the other end of the spectrum and you don't need as much, so we don't give them as much. And unlike, you know, the drugs that are processed by your liver or your kidneys, like the vaccines don't leave your arm. So it isn't based on a dose of the vaccine being like graded down based on weight, the way that other drugs might be. It has to do with the immune response that you actually get after you get the vaccine. So a couple of myths from common questions that I have been asked by my family and friends. So you've had COVID and you don't need a vaccine. Actually, if you've had COVID, you still need a vaccine because your risk of reinfection is more than 5 times higher than for those people who were infected and then vaccinated. The more immunity you have on board, the more protection. And you can't like max this out. Like the study in Israel is demonstrating, like you can give it again and that's totally safe, but you're not really going to be able to like go higher at some point. But you also are going to be able to get it to that like peak level, and that's sort of what you want. And this is the only graphs I'm going to show you guys today, but basically the reason I'm showing it is because some people with documented previous infection do not develop immune memory to protect them next time. And so the purpose of this is to show here that regardless of whether you had an asymptomatic, a symptomatic, or were even hospitalized, there are people who do not develop an immune response to infection that would give them protective immunity for next time. This is one study, and then this is a different study showing sort of the same thing, people who were either uninfected and then vaccinated. This is the amount of antibodies that they actually made. And then in these people, they were previously infected. You can see there are these sad 2 little dots down here at the bottom. These guys didn't have any immunity. And then it shows the people who did, who were previously infected, and how they boosted when they got their when they actually got vaccinated. So what you don't want to be is you don't want to be one of these people down here at the bottom of the graph. You want to get vaccinated so that you know you're up here somewhere. And the only way to really make sure that you have a consistent and predictable amount of immune memory is to actually get vaccinated and not rely on previous infection. So the other question I got asked a lot was that, you know, serious side effects of vaccines are ignored. And my best example for how and why this is not true is that the J&J vaccine was paused because serious risk was reported. So we have the VAERS system in the United States, and then they also came up with a V-Safe system so that severe or any adverse effects that people experienced after vaccination could be reported. And that data is combed through by a lot of people. And they were able to detect at the time that there had been 17 million people vaccinated with J&J, and there were 54 cases of blood clots, which would be 1 in 315,000 doses. And I think this is an incredibly fine-tooth comb, personally, that they were able to detect a severe adverse event using this system, meaning that 1 in 315,000 doses, they were able to pick that up, and that they actually acted upon it, and they paused the vaccine. 36 of those people were cared for in an intensive care unit, and 9 people did die from this vaccine. So I don't think there's any reason to minimize this. This actually happened. It was detected. And as far as I can find, although it's hard to find like follow-up data, I can't find that there have been any incidences of anyone suffering this blood clot severe adverse event since the pause, because what they figured out was how to treat it and what the signs of it were, and what to do if somebody was actually experiencing it. And the important thing they needed to get out the clinicians was to not treat with heparin, from my understanding. And so actually, I feel so good about the J&J vaccine that I actually got a J&J boost as my boost. I've had COVID, then I had a full Pfizer series, and then I decided to get a J&J boost. So the other question I got asked about early on was about whether or not the COVID vaccines change your DNA. And I think this is because we really didn't do a very good job explaining what mRNA does in your body. But the DNA in your cell is in the nucleus, and all of your proteins are made outside of the nucleus. So when you get this vaccine, you actually don't ever have any interaction with your DNA at all. The vaccine puts the RNA into this part of your cell called the cytoplasm, and then it is actually turned into or translated into proteins, which are those spike proteins from the virus, that can then be used to stimulate the immune response. So there's no DNA affected at all during this process. And that's also true with the J&J vaccine. It just starts with a different template and then makes mRNA and then makes protein. The other one I got asked a lot was about mRNA vaccines causing infertility. So this was a social media false report. Somebody thought that 2 proteins looked really similar, and the one protein has something to do with the placenta, and these proteins have nothing in common and are not very similar at all. And actually, this has done a huge disservice to pregnant people, because people who are pregnant are really suffering from this infection, and it is caused in a lot of women to experience pregnancy loss at the very late stages of pregnancy, which is awful. And these vaccines have been shown to be safe during pregnancy, and they will result in the mother making antibodies that will be passed to the baby across the placenta and help protect that child from infection for approximately the first 6 months of life. So to summarize, they're very safe. The vaccines are very safe, and they're very effective to prevent disease requiring hospitalization. Prior infection doesn't give you a consistent and predictable level of protection, and the dose makes the poison with the virus, and you can reduce your exposure with masks. Moving forward from this point in the pandemic, I think we're really fortunate that the KN95s and KF94s have become available, because that's going to give people who are particularly vulnerable a tool in their own toolbox that they can use to help protect themselves. It's great if everyone can mask all the time, but I don't necessarily think that is something we are going to be able to swallow as a country. So at least we have a new tool that those of us who need to protect ourselves for a very specific reason and are very concerned, at least we have something we can do, which is use a really high quality mask. Vaccination does reduce spread. People who are vaccinated are less likely to transmit the virus to other people. This has been documented in studies of household contacts. So people who are infected and then are going to be in a household with their uninfected family members, they go in and swab the family members every day, or the family members swab themselves and submit the samples. And what they've seen is that if the family member who was infected was vaccinated, they're less likely to transmit to their family. And unfortunately, the pandemic will end, but this virus is going to be endemic, so probably going to have to learn to live with it. And I wish it wasn't so, but sadly it is. And then the last thing, one of the last things I want to show you is kind of how I think about our immune response. And so in my mind, it looks like this, where you start out with like absolutely no immune protection whatsoever. And then you get the vaccine or you get infection and you get a little protection. And then you get it again and you get a little more. And you always kind of drop down to about here. But every time you get it, you'll bump up. And so I tend to think of it as like a roller coaster, and thinking about like, what ride do you want? Like, do you want the predictable ride where you have like a really nice like set of like safety straps and you're going to just go on the ride and then you're going to be done? And that would be with a vaccine. Or do you want the really thrilling ride where you're not really sure who's been servicing it and whether or not, you're actually going to make it to the end? And it is a choice, whether or not you're going to do one or the other. So if you want to help your community, and I know you guys are all about that, so stay max vax. They offer you a booster, get it. There's no harm in getting it. Wear a well-fitting mask in public when transmission is high. This isn't going to be forever. It will eventually drop down and not be so insufferable. And if you have the time and are able to, register as a substitute teacher or volunteer at your local school, because they are really suffering right now, and we do want to keep our kids in class. It benefits all of us, and especially them, to have them in class. And here's my like shameless plug for if you want to participate in vaccine research or in COVID research. There's plenty of research studies available at the University of Arizona that you can participate in, and we would love to have your blood. We're kind of vampires like that. And thank you for your attention. I really appreciate you guys inviting me here today. Happy to take all your questions. Can't hear you though.
Yeah, so the contact information, if you wouldn't mind sharing that, and then Steve, if you wouldn't mind putting it on there, and hopefully we can get that out to, I don't know if you can take a screenshot, maybe we can email out to the club members. Unfortunately, we are a bit pressed for time, so I don't think we have any time for questions, although I'm sure that there are quite a few of them. So if you wouldn't mind being available via email or something, that we can contact you that way at your email address and go from there. But I wanted to say thank you so much. Obviously, it's a very serious and topical topic, and we appreciate you coming down. And it's a tradition in our club that all our speakers that come and join us or join us virtually, we do a donation to Rotary International. Rotary International is dedicated to the eradication of polio. And so in your honor, we're going to donate to Rotary International enough to vaccinate 100 kids. So thank you so much for joining us. And
thank you. That's awesome. That's good.
and hopefully maybe sometime in the future we can have you back. It would be great. Like you're saying, we have to learn to live with it. Hopefully just surges and phases kind of mellow out a little bit, and we can have you here in person sometime. So we'll make Al not come that day. So just give us a heads up so that Al won't be here. So, but thank you so much. We're gonna move forward here and probably get a truncated version of last bits of our meeting. But I do know that we have Queen of Hearts today. Is that Bobby D? All right.
Reason that I need your help is that the winner of today's drawings meet
Oh, how about that? Heady play there, Bobby D. Well, best of luck, Bobby D. So it's the pot again is at. All right.
What happened?
Two of clubs. Tough break there. That was a great deal, Beverly. Thank you so much. That was really good. We'll have to have you back and do the next Queen of Hearts unless I pull. Then make sure to give me the right card. We did have a sergeant scheduled today, but again, we're pressed for time, so we're gonna have to skip that today. But if you're so, yes, go ahead, Andy. I'm taking it's important.
I'm gonna jump in and do a little happy bucks because it fits today. I'm gonna do a little bit of happy bucks. It fits today. It was announced this week that Pakistan has gone 1 year with no new cases.
All right.
The only country left with new cases reported is Afghanistan. We're down to one country.
All right. Well, that's great news. All right, that's definitely worth a happy buck there. So thank you for that. All right. Well, with that, just a reminder, if you have cans, go ahead and meet Frank outside. I want to thank all our guests. Bruce and Beverly, thank you so much. And hopefully we'll be seeing you soon again. And Susan, thank you so much for joining us. And of course, Brendan, thank you so much for coming and joining us. You know, Al, we put up with him. Sharon, we love. But Al, you know. Well, okay. We'll go have a beer after this, Al. It's like knows like, as I say. All right. Well, I guess with that, we'll conclude our meeting by reciting the four-way test of the things we think, say, and do. All right. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendship? And fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you so much, everybody. And check your email to sign up if you can. Thank you so much.